You know, my favorite part about that intro that just rolled, that little meet Kiro and then some code pops up, is that it's showing Rust code because yes, Rust is objectively the best programming language in the world. Hello, friends, and welcome to this Thursday edition of the Kiro live stream thingy. Welcome to people from LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and even Twitter. So, hey, friends, hey, how are you all doing? Say hello in chat. Tell me where you're joining me from. Today, I do have a special stream. I do have Brian Beach joining me here in a second, and him and I are going to go a little bit, not a little bit, more in depth into why and how steering docs work and why should you care about them, all of those kinds of things. So steering docs are incredibly powerful, and they are here to give you the most out of Kiro when you are building stuff with it. So absolutely critical for you to know how to use steering docs. But before we get into steering docs, I do have Adnan here joining me, and Adnan is gonna talk to you a little bit about pricing, potentially demystify certain things, help answer questions. So let's talk about that thing. So I'm gonna do a little. I wish I had a really cool transition video here. So I don't have a transition video, so I'm gonna just magically pop in Adnan. Hello, Adnan. Welcome to the show. Hey. How are you doing?
I am doing great. You don't do magic transition for pricing discussion, so you just snap right to
I
the
do not do
pricing
magic.
discussion.
Just like hey, Adnan. First of all, introduce yourself to the chat just so they know who you're talking to, and then let's talk about pricing.
Yeah. So hey folks, I am Adnan Ijaz. I lead the product management for developer tooling, developer agents in agentic AI division. Specifically, my team owns Amazon Q Developer and Kiro, and all variations of those.
Excellent. So let's talk about. I know people keep calling it the elephant in the room, but let's talk about the ghost in the room. Let's talk about Kiro and its pricing. So can you give us a little update on the pricing, the current situation, what's going on, and how does it look like, and what have you been seeing?
Yeah, I mean, as a lot of you provided feedback on the pricing we rolled out a couple of weeks ago, and there were lots of questions around how is the spec request related to vibe request? How do I think about that? And there are of course variations of those questions, and we've been working with the community since then to make sure that we get it right, and the pricing that we provide to you for Kiro is worth the value that you get, and it allows you to do meaningful work. So what happened, and just for those who have not seen our announcement of blog, when we rolled out pricing, unfortunately we found a bug, and it was a pretty nasty bug in the sense that there were cases where a few requests would consume, a few prompts would consume all of your requests, and trust us, that was not intentional. We just found it after we rolled out. So what we did, um, we of course we had to fix the issue. So we rolled out a fix, but what we did, we refunded everyone's August usage, and we also enabled generous. I would say, I mean, some people could question that, so I would drop the word generous, but we had 1,000 vibes and 200 spec requests also provided as overages that you can enable. And our hope was that you are able to, once you have subscribed, when you have consumed all your requests included in your subscription, which we're going to refund the subscription fee. If you need more vibe requests and spec requests, you can enable overages, and those are also free of cost. So that's what we rolled out last week, and the feedback generally has been positive. We're seeing people provide both. I mean, of course, we're looking at the data on our side, but we're also hitting qualitative feedback that with the changes now they are able to do meaningful work with the limits that are included in the subscription. So we continue to watch for that. So going forward, I think what you can expect is that, I mean, we have had a number of discussions with folks in the community to really make sure that we get the pricing model right. And those conversations are still ongoing. What you can expect over the coming weeks, you can expect us to tweak a little bit with that. Like, for instance, one of the things that I think the the most common request that I've heard so far is that allow us to use vibe and spec request together. Why bifurcate if we can give us single pool? Um, and that is an area that we're taking very seriously, and we're looking into how we can actually enable that, so that you don't like. I think, of course, as you can imagine, with all options there are pros and cons. So how do we actually mitigate some of the concerns that led us to having two bifurcated pools? So you can expect us to talk more about those, how we're thinking about those pieces of feedback and what are we going to do about that. And not too far in the future. Hopefully, in the coming days, you'll hear from us.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately that's kind of one of those things that I've heard as well from people like, why can't it be the same pool of whatever requests and tokens or whatever you want to call them for both specs and vibes? But I never knew the pricing was such a complicated matter. So, and it turns out it is very, very complex.
Yeah, I think I will look at this is a community, so I can be
Sure.
very vocally. I can share our thinking vocally and what led to the pricing change after the launch to begin with, and how we're thinking about it. I think one thing that I can tell you with very high confidence, that our tenant that we need to do the right thing by developers is there. And that, in fact, like a lot of people say, hey, you rolled out pricing, there are these issues, like what happened? And I would say part of the reason, or how we are approaching this, is whatever we want to make sure that we give you value or provide you value in a sustainable way. So the team on our side is very much aligned that we don't want to do stuff where we just like, all right, let's get the usage and let's just see what we'll do afterwards, right?
Yeah.
We believe in the long run that is a bigger trust buster than you being upfront on what can be done in a sustainable way. So I think that is the tenant. Our goal and our hope is that we can find the right way to for you to use the product, and then you get the value. But a lot of these decisions that you could, and somebody could argue that why don't you just like get all the users and then you change the pricing or change the limits to your heart's content. That is not how we're approaching this. So we want to make sure that we build this relationship for the long run. So and if anything, like over the years, what AWS has done in general and what we're committed to do even with Kiro is like, as we optimize, as we do things better, are there ways for us to pass that value on to our users and developers? And that is the mindset, and I think that is why you've probably seen us react quickly after we realized that, hey, the usage patterns require us to make some adjustment to the pricing, which we did. And some parts we got wrong. There were some bugs which did not help at all.
Yeah.
So we're committed to going back and revisiting and making sure that while we hold that tenant, that transparency and earning your trust is the most important thing, but we also want to do it in a way that is sustainable
Yeah.
and sets us both of us as up for success in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. Because like if you kind of like did what you mentioned here, like kind of gave everybody everything and then kind of decided the pricing later on, that could have seemed like a little bit of a unfair of kind of pulling the rug under people. So being upfront with it is definitely worth it. Now, people have been asking, and this is a kind of a chat had with a bunch of people, is like specs versus vibes, right? And I know currently we distinguish those two things, and is there any sort of a firm definition of how much? I don't even know if you should talk about tokens, but like what is a spec and what is a vibe in this case? Is there a firm definition that people can look at it right now and understand it?
Yeah. I think before answering your question, there's a lot of thinking, and I'm sure we're not the only one who spend a lot of time thinking about getting the
Yeah.
pricing right and pricing models. I think inherently, the key to this, and I'm sure your audience would understand, is the non-deterministic nature of the LLMs,
Yeah.
right? So the request could vary. The same request could take a different path. Yes, there are techniques that we do to make sure that there's consistently in the range good quality, but things can be off. So the challenge in general is that what you're trying to do is simplify consumption models for the user, so they don't have to think about, okay, if I do this thing, it's going to cost me 50,000 more tokens of that. So
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
request-based mechanism is a way for us to simplify that, so that you don't. At the end of the day, it's the tokens being consumed, but really, can we simplify that? So that's where it all starts. I think that is the foundation. Now with spec, those of you who have tried it, and I think we've been, it's been the feedback around specs have been overwhelmingly positive. in terms of what people are able to do and how they think about it. Yes, there are, of course, with everything that even works well, there's feedback, and we're looking into that and we're improving that further. But the intent with the spec is that you are if you do benchmarks, and we have done benchmarks with certain feature developments, and our Kiro team itself uses Kiro to build Kiro. So what you see is with specs you are able to do more, but it also consumes more token because it's the structured way of doing things here, specifying requirements and design and the executing task. So the thing that I would say is establishing one-to-one equivalence with vibe is not really a good way to look at specs, because and your mileage may vary. The reason I'm reluctant in saying that, oh, with spec you are able to do 3x of vibes, like I don't want to put that number out there, or any of that, because it's going to depend on how you think about it, and not every change is best suited for specs. So the intent here is that with specs you're able to do more work, it consumes more, and therefore by definition they will take more credits or consume more requests than vibe.
Yeah.
And that is how we're thinking about it. um, by separating out the pool, I acknowledge again that it has introduced additional level of complexity that you need to think through. That, oh, what if I'm run out of vibe requests? What do I do? And that is the part we're committed to really simplifying in the over the coming days, and then we're working hard towards that.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of great comments here from people. It's is coming. I think this is something that it's either in the works or already has some sort of a version of it. But people are asking, can we see how many tokens we're using per request? Basically, what I understand is people want observability features to be able to understand that what's the average they're spending per task, per request, per vibe, whatever. I think it will help them maybe. And we're not talking tokens here, like you said, like
Yeah, I know, I get it.
Yeah.
This is, by the way, let me again. I'm gonna keep talking transparently.
Yeah,
Our current thinking. There's a challenge. I think the way to look at is, and we have talked to a number of folks who also use other products as well, where they get some sort of visibility. And the question that you generally ask them, okay, what do you do with that visibility? And then the obvious answer is we can't do anything. Like, you call a number of tools, you call a number of tools. So I think the need for transparency is obvious. And how many requests were consumed. You asking a very simple ask versus a very complex ask should not both result in like the same amount of requests. So how do you actually help with that? So those are the things that I think we're working towards. The challenge with the tokens is ultimately, like for instance, I'll give you an example. If you are in a long running session and you're going back and forth with Kiro, we are able to optimize in the sense that, a lot more gets cached. So therefore you are able to do more versus, so if I just say, hey, you know what, I'm going to charge you one request for 100K tokens or whatever, just pick a number.
Right.
Then it becomes tricky. Then it gets harder because then I think you might think that it's going to help you in terms of that it's fixed. But it also takes where there are opportunities for us to actually, that 100K may actually be 99% or 95% that is cash. So therefore, we're able to give you more for the same request. So those are some of the reasons that we don't necessarily get into the detail of, okay, this request consumed these many tokens. And honestly, I think we would be willing to, we'd be very open to doing that if you had a way to control that.
Yeah.
If you said that, like, you know what, because it's a product that across the board, not just Kiro, your interaction with the system is a prompt, is it a spec, or is a task, and you trust the system to really optimize and give you the best possible quality, but also optimizing for tools call, token usage, and all of that. So I think the best way to look at it, again, I'll recap my answer. We need to do better to give you more tools to gain transparency. What we have right now is just a dashboard of requests. And I think that incorporating some of the feedback pieces that have come from the community would be a good start. But we are looking into what are the additional things we can do. I think beyond that, what will happen is our hope is to, part of the reason we made August free is, and we will extend that into if we have to, if we believe that it's helpful, we may extend that benefit by another couple of weeks. And that is something that we're looking into. But the intent is that then you use the product, you start gaining that intuition, and then you start seeing, okay, the simple task is costing me 1 credit or 1 request. a more complex may take like more than one. And that is the best way to go and build that. And of course, on our side, what other tools can we expose for you to build that intuition, which are not necessarily the token count, the LLM calls, because those are the things that you don't necessarily control directly. You don't even know what happened. If I give you 100K token versus 150K, you still don't know what I did in the back end to give you that. So I think it's really it's those are the reasons why we're not getting to that level. And otherwise, it's not like there is no secret or no. We're not trying to be sneaky in a way to do that. So those are the complications that we have to consider as we go there.
And that's absolutely, I think the way I see it is the fact that there's a lot of optimizations in the backend happening. There's a caching. There's a whole lot of stuff that's going on, and you're not having to deal with tokens as an individual user, right? You don't have to worry about token optimization because a lot of that actual token optimization is happening at the backend. So, if you could see all of your tokens, what would you do with it? Like, I mean, I don't think you can do anything more beyond just maybe sending a smaller prompt or something. But I do see a reason for like maybe having
But I
some
think
little bit more
that one,
transparency.
sorry, to make sure that I do acknowledge that there is feedback and there is need for better tools to build that transparency. I think that feedback, we've taken it to heart, and we continue
Yeah,
to see how we can actually improve that experience. Just
yeah,
wrap.
yeah. Awesome. Well, that's excellent. Perfect. Let me see if there's any questions here from the chat about pricing. But yeah, I mean, I think we're looking forward to kind of finding out what how are we going to be solving this problem, what the pricing is going to look like. So, folks in the chat, folks on Discord, please bear with us. We're trying to work this out, and any kind of feedback like this is super welcome. So, if you want to submit us feedback, like there's always Discord, you can reach out to a bunch of us there. You can give us even GitHub issues if you want, but please do know we are absolutely aware of this, and we've actually been talking about this whole week. So at least I'm back this week, so that's why I know we're talking at least this week.
Oh
So,
no, it's been an ongoing topic, even before the launch, after the launch. It is an important one. I think people care about it. We absolutely care about it. Like, we want to make sure you get the value for your money. 100%. We're taking it very serious in terms of what we need to do and address them.
It's been the talk of the town. So perfect. And Seema is mentioning here a great comment, right? That's fine. It's challenging, but as a customer, it would be great to know how much I have remaining instead of just stopping of Kiro stopping working. So I think that's a very actual also.
Yeah,
just
and I
gauge of it.
Yes, and I think what we realized is we built the dashboard, which gives you how many requests you've consumed and how many are left. And what it is also obvious, it's not very discoverable. Not a lot of people know that it exists on the left-hand side when you click on that. So so we need to improve the discoverability. And then the other things that, of course, as you can imagine that we have been thinking about the roadmap. So one of the questions that we ask is, give you the visibility, and of course when it's approaching your limits, and even when you have hit the limits, how do we actually, so one obvious answer is you go either to the higher tier or enable overages, but are there other things that we can do to at least let you keep going if you choose not to upgrade or put more money in? Things like budgeting, people have asked like, hey, you have overages, but let me put in $10, and then that is manage that. All of that, trust us, it's coming. It's in the roadmap, and not roadmap. Some, like, I'm talking about some future stuff. We just need to get the initial billing right, so that we unblock you guys, and then you can imagine a number of these things coming as we go.
I can confirm that the team building Kiro is incredibly nimble and agile. So like they are very reactive to all the stuff we're saying. So I do see this coming in some relatively short amount of time. So okay. Adnan, thank you so much. Has there been anything we haven't mentioned on pricing that people need to know right now?
No, I think we covered most of it. I can confirm that I think watch out for more announcements coming out over the next couple of days on how, one of the things that we're trying to do is to provide community regular updates on how things shaping up. So if all goes well, you can expect an announcement come out in a couple of days on how we're thinking about it, how next few weeks look like, and what are the things that we're thinking about. And so I would say just watch out for that. It's on its way.
Excellent. So Adnan, thank you so much, my friend. I'm gonna be letting
just
you
kick
go
me
now.
out and bring Brian in, the real deal.
Yeah, I'm gonna kick you out. I'm gonna bring in Brian, and we're gonna be talking about steering dog. So thank you so much, and thank you for the clarity. Please do keep an eye out for messages from Adnan on Discord. There's a lot of
Yeah.
Glad to see
And if
some
you're not on
positive
Discord community, please join that. I
Yeah.
think a lot of us are hanging out there, listening to feedback, responding in real time. Of course, we'll communicate on all channels, but Discord,
Yeah.
becomes our primary way for you to engage us.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Adnan. Thank you so much. I'll drop you in. I'll bring in Brian. See you in a bit.
Sounds-
Okay. So, perfect. Do I do a transition? I don't know. Maybe something like I can't clap and click at the same time. So there you go. Almost in time.
I love it. That was almost perfect.
Almost
I think you
perfect,
nailed
yeah.
it.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, thank you so much for all the comments here. I left a bunch of comments here that were not pricing related, so we're going to be talking about those things in a second. Seema mentioned about pricing. We want to pay for the ultimate plan. I think that's a Adnan, if you're watching this right now, this is a very, very important thing we should also consider. Like, I know there's a whole wait list, and there's this. I understand the reason because of the quality of access to all of them, but understanding that some people really want to use Kiro. So we should be looking into that. Okay, so Brian, welcome to the show. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. Very good. It's been a while since we've been on stage together, if you can call this a stage. I feel like I run into you at everything, but if I remember, it was before COVID last time we actually shared stage together.
It's been ages. Okay, so welcome to the show, and just let the chat know who are you and what do you do and all those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone. My name obviously is Brian Beach, and I'm the tech lead for the developer experience community here at AWS. So I lead a virtual team of people that are interested in all of our developer tools, everything from CDK and CloudFormation to onto a series of different generative AI tools to help accelerate developers, things like Q and AWS Transform, and of course, Kiro.
Okay, yeah, amazing. Well, so we're going to be talking today about steering docs, but I want to look at some of the questions we have here. There are a couple of questions that you and I could potentially answer. First of all, I understand there's an issue with closed captioning. We don't have closed captioning on this live stream platform. We're working on it, just so you know. We fully understand that's one of those things people need. I personally love to watch video with closed captions because I don't turn on sound a lot of the time, so I get you. And apparently Derek says that his transcription thing doesn't pick me up, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it just refuses to understand my accent or a thing. So let's see. There's a couple of questions here. Denali, Texas said, do you have data on what type/scope of feature request is successful with and without using spec to task flow versus just a single request? Do you find certain languages, max files touch, types of requests work better than others? I know we spoke to the service team about kind of getting these metrics. I don't know if we have that data right now, but I'm going to take your comment here and pass it on to the team just to make sure they're well aware of that and maybe to provide us some information. So.
Yeah, Darko, I get almost the impression that there are some people on who don't even really grok what a spec request is and how that's different from vibes. So maybe we should just spend a moment talking about that. There were a couple of questions in there about not just when to use them, but sort of why I would and what it is.
Okay, yeah, that is actually quite fair. Yes. Do we have a piece of content? I think we have a piece of content for that, right? We can share with people.
Yeah, I have a project that I was working on in another webinar yesterday that's half complete that I could probably pull up if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's have a look.
Yeah, so let me share my screen here.
Go for it.
And
you're getting a sneak peek at an unfinished blog post, so please get your pitchforks out.
Yeah.
So we see Kiro right now.
Excellent. Yep, and that's intentional. We'll come. I think the blog post we'll get there on some of that more advanced content. This isn't one I was really intending to even bring up, but just to maybe give people a sense of exactly.
Can I ask you to zoom into it, like Command Plus?
Oh yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah. Let me maybe clear some of this out of the way. Make some room. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we had an event, Gen AI Day yesterday, and in that I was just kind of live building this Hangman game.
Okay.
I'll show you in a little bit the kind of final version of it. I wasn't originally intending to bring this up, but the intent here is, the reason that I'm bringing this up is to sort of talk about exactly what is a spec, because that's relevant and it'll tie into steering in a minute. But for those who haven't seen specs before, I'll only spend a minute on it.
Yep.
Often when we're vibe coding, right, what we do is we just start with usually a pretty short prompt, and we get, we get the agent running, we get it working, and we probably haven't given it enough information. And then we make a lot of corrections. There's a whole lot of follow-up prompts about that isn't exactly what I meant. Can you change this? Can you do this? And essentially what we want to do with specs is kind of start that process much earlier, take the agent and pull it back into the requirement development process. Somewhere along the line with vibe coding, we lost the discipline that we've built over many years of refining the software development process. And we've kind of gone back to this just very iterative, without planning type process. And so what we want to do here is not just spend more time in the planning process, but bring the agent into it so that it can essentially work out all of the ambiguity and resolve all of the uncertainty before we start writing code. Because in this vibe coding pattern, right, we're just always generating technical debt at an alarming rate because we're constantly making these corrective actions. And so what I'm showing here is the beginnings of a spec. I started this just saying, let's create a hangman game. And rather than jumping in and just making some assumptions about what I want, Kiro here started generating a set of requirements.
Okay.
And you can see these requirements are just a series of user stories about how you want to play the game. I'm not going to reproduce all of this, but I will scroll down. There were some corrections that I made during this demo, like I actually want to support multilingual. I want to be able to both localize the content and have words in different languages. And so I went in and made those adjustments, and I can just edit the plans here, or I can ask Kiro to make the changes for me. But the point being, we work out all of this uncertainty before we start developing. And then we go from requirements into a technical design. And in this particular case, I think the design always looks a little bit better in preview because it's generated some diagrams. But you can see that it has put together a plan for the game. And it's pretty thorough here, right? We're not writing code yet. We're just defining interfaces.
Yep.
But this is reasonably thorough. And the other thing that I've observed is if I started a hangman game in vibe coding mode, the tendency is one where it would probably spin up a canvas and just start throwing some components on there and drawing things for me, as I would if I hadn't thought through it. But when we force the agent to sit back and plan a little bit, you see it starts to really take the problem seriously and apply some much more mature software engineering practices, like simply just bringing in an MVC pattern to handle the game and thinking through things like having a game controller and a language manager that are all part of it. So part of it is just bringing the agent in earlier, but the side effect of that is we get a much more mature design as part of it. And just to round this out, and then I'll stop because I know that's not what we're talking about. The final process in this, we go from requirements to design to the task list. And this is the backlog of things that we're going to do. And here you can see that I've executed the first couple of these and then in the demo aborted and just jumped ahead. But I can come in and execute the steps that are in this implementation plan. And when we talk about spec requests versus vibe requests, this is what we're talking about, is we're executing the plan that was built as part of the specification. So for those that haven't seen this before, I just wanted to set the stage a little bit.
Yeah. It's important to understand that. And again, specs are kind of one of those things that for me feel a superpower of Kiro. It's one of those things that keep me consistent in the way I build stuff, in a sense that I can control stuff before it actually starts happening. And if it's a matter of speed, vibe coding could be faster. But to be honest, I think you should bleed some speed and then gain some control.
And there are still absolutely times, right, for vibe coding when I just want to ask a question. Sometimes I just let's be honest, it's been 10 years or so since I was a real developer writing code every day. I'm an imposter at this point, so I had to ask a lot of ignorant questions, and I'll often just find myself in vibe mode saying, "Hey, what does this actually? What is MVC? What does that actually mean? How does it work?" I might come in and ask questions like that. I'm not quite that rudimentary yet. I haven't lost that much skill, but.
Well, so like the way I love to use this, like I actually use the whole vibe mode to get into the spec. So what I actually do is before I go and ask Kiro to generate the spec, I actually do a little vibe coding session or vibe chatting session with Kiro, or insert your favorite coding assistant here. And I kind of discuss the thing I want to solve. And then through a little discussion, I ask it to generate me a prompt that will create the spec. So it's I add a little extra step to it, just then my prompt is then way clearer in what I wanted to do that. So
absolutely.
It seems to help a lot. Okay, couple comments here. Derek Gusto is asking, since it's steering files related stream, will agents.md standard for common steering files format across AI IDs be supported by Kiro? I don't know. We have Nathan here in the chat. Maybe Nathan can tell us a little bit more about that. But so far, steering docs in Kiro they're markdown files. They're nothing different, but they're just named differently and located differently. It's in a .kiro directory, and there is a .kiro / I think steering _doc, and that's where the files are going to be stored at. They just have a different location, but in essence, you can use your agent MD file there as well. Not a problem. As long as it is in the right location, it should be perfectly fine. Another comment here from Angel is saying, if I have a Kiro Pro subscription, do I still need a Q Pro subscription? You do not. So while you can use, I think, can you still use a Q Pro subscription for Kiro? Yes, you can. You can use your Q Pro subscription to use Kiro. If you have a Kiro Pro subscription, you do not need a Q Pro subscription. That's simple as that. And then Jack, and I see that Nathan has answered already, but Kiro is using an old version of VS Code. That means some certain C# extensions are from Microsoft are not compatible. And Nathan says that they're working on it. So there's a link in the chat, by the way. You can go and check out Kiro.dev. In the docs, you can see the extension compatibility. And that's I've noticed that as well. I've noticed some certain extensions don't work, but hey, that's gonna happen. Okay, so let's talk steering files. Steering files are one of those things that kind of also circle back to the pricing, can absolutely help you improve your cost or optimize your cost in this case, because by introducing proper steering files, they can actually help you, well, spend less requests, I guess. So Brian, what are steering files, my friend?
Yeah. So the steering file is nothing more than some additional guidance that describes how we want, what good looks like, for lack of a better term. And I think the most common one that I see up front, and we'll get more advanced as we talk, but the most common scenario here is I am often talking to a developer and they're using Kiro or another tool, and the feedback is, hey, this is great, but this doesn't look anything like how my company, how my enterprise writes code. We have a set of coding standards. And usually there's a bunch of rework that happens, right? So when you're talking about using additional requests in order to make corrections, if we can tell it up front exactly what good looks like, what are my expectations, that will really allow me to get it right the first time, so I don't have to go back and make all of those corrections. So I can essentially codify what good looks like in my steering rules. And so that's typically the most basic, is I just want to define what my coding standards look like.
It's great because, like, not only for coding standards, but also like for folks working there on personal projects, you may have a preference for using certain libraries. You may have a preference, even a language preference, right? Like, so by default, like when you start a new project, when you have a new project, you ask it to build a Hangman game, and a lot of times, for certain reasons, Kiro assumes, sure, Python, but hey, I don't want Python. I want to do it in Java. So like
you want to do it in Rust.
Oh, I know. I'm just pandering to the Java people. So you want to kind of preface a bunch of those things, because that's going to make it a lot more efficient, because it's not going to have to go back and forth and like defining multiple different things and like, oh, Python, no, Python, stop using Python, and then like use Rust, but please use this specific crate. So you can upfront give a lot of those things, and it will help you a lot. You can also use steering docs for, like, one of the things I like to use it is like, I tell it I am mid-skill level in this programming language, right? I am this good in Rust or that bad in Java, so that it knows that it needs to explain things a little bit better or not at all for me when doing stuff. So
absolutely.
Okay, so please continue.
Yeah, maybe let's. I think the best way to see this is let's see this in action with the before and after. So I'm pulling up a sample code base here. This is the Flask-R sample application. If you've ever written Flask in Python, it's just a simple micro web
Can I ask you to zoom into it, like maybe a couple of times, just so we can
Yep.
see the?
Sorry, I'm zooming the wrong thing here.
Take your time.
Good. Yeah, keep reminding me. I'll keep forgetting. I should have set all of them up first. So I'm not going to dig too deeply into what Flask-R is. It's just a really simple application that allows you to add and in this case, not remove entries because we don't have delete functionality yet. And that's what I'm going to ask it to do. So I'm going to come in. I probably should put together a spec for this, but for demo purposes, I'm going to stay in Vibe mode. And I'm just going to say, I want to add the ability to delete. And of course, make sure that you touch the code, SQL, and HTML here. And Kiro's going to go through. I've done this demo a bunch of times, and so it'll go through and read in. It picks out the correct files pretty quickly. And usually what it does is it goes through and first edits. Actually, if you caught it there, it just added this ID into the select statement because it needs the ID to handle the delete later. This is the display. And then it went through and also updated the HTML. Looks like it's going to update the CSS too to add some styling. I'm not even going to run the app, so little of that matters. And if we come back here, all of these, I can go in and take a look. You saw it made 2 edits to the Flask-R app. So if we come and look at this in diff mode, you can see that it added the select. More importantly, it went in and added this delete method. And this is an example where generally when I ask a question, it's not going to know what my standards look like. And this is a place where there's a couple things that I want. I always use type hints. I always use doc strings, probably a bunch of other things. But I don't see that reflected in the code. And your first response might be, hey, this could be better. I'd like this to improve. This is where steering comes in. So I'm going to come in and just revert all of those changes and say, let's not accept any of them. And let's go in and add steering here. I'll get into generating steering documents in a minute. I'm just going to explicitly add one. So I'll create a new steering doc for Python. And you can see here, I'm just I'm going to go very minimalist here and say, these are my Python coding standards. And I expect you to always use type ins and always use doc strings. This is kind of very minimalist. And I'll talk about in a bit how to make this better. But for now, let's go back to that same solution. I'll bring that file back up. And then let me just grab that same prompt again. And let's ask it to go and add those capabilities in. And now with the Python kind of my coding conventions codified in that steering document, you see that Kiro automatically pulls in that steering document as part of this request. So at some level, your steering documents are nothing more than additional context that's going to be implicitly added to the request. But when we use them for the right purposes, we get dramatic differences. Hopefully, it's always scary doing this stuff live, but hopefully we now get
everything in a coding assistant is just context. It's just a big old prompt, but there's certain ways of shaping it for it to be better.
Yep. So now it's gone through and really made those same changes again, but I'm hopeful this time that as it came through, now we start to see type hints leaking in here, and we've got some doc strings coming in. In fact, it also went through and actually fixed up some of the other places where I hadn't done this in the past and cleaned that up for me. It was touching this method, so it added in a doc string here. So it is really, in its simplest form, you can think of steering as the way to codify your best practices and then have Kiro do that right the first time. So I don't have to go back and ask for corrections. And I don't have to say, hey, can you go add type hints to everything? Can you go add doc strings to everything?
Yeah. And like one of the first things I would always add to any sort of Python project, not because I think it's just better for Python, but it's better for coding assistants and Python. In your Python steering files, always tell it, unless you have a reason not to use Pydantic. Just because you want to make sure you have strong types on Python. It will make your code a lot more robust when it's generated by an LLM. So. Okay,
absolutely.
But you see, like, this is super simple. Like, it's just like a bullet pointed list of like, these are my coding standards, and that's what I do. So amazing.
So kind of coming back then to what we were talking about when we were talking about specs and bringing the agent into that conversation. Well, I also want the agent to have some input on my coding standards. And
Yep.
so Kiro gives you this ability to refine. So I'm going to ask Kiro to refine this. This is a good starting point, but let me get kind of Kiro's input on this and see what it would do to clean this up a little bit and really think through additional requirements that I might want to add. And you can see here, it's not blindly doing this, right? It's looking at my project, getting a better feel of what I've done in the past. In this case, it's just a sample project. And then it goes and really builds this out and adds a bunch more context into this. Right. Before we even look at this, if we step back and think about best practices here, these agents have evolved to the point where we should be thinking of them as a teammate, and we should be inviting that teammate to give us input on everything that we do. This is, take maybe lean software development, right? It sort of comes from lean manufacturing ideas. And part of the core concepts here were we want to pull in all of the practitioners into the decision-making because they're the ones who are hands-on. Bring them in and ask them. So here we're just asking Kiro for input. And you can see here, right, it really built this out and added a bunch more suggestions. I might go clean this up. There might be things in here that I disagree with and that isn't the way I write them. I should always have a human in the loop go through and look this over. But it's really built out a much more robust plan than I did. And notice it's also put in some optimizations. So if I highlight it, that little thing pops up. But right, it's also, rather than attaching this to every request, and over time you're going to have a lot of steering documents, it's putting some pattern matching in and saying, only when I'm working with Python should you include this extra context. And then I can really refine it. I might have one of these for HTML. I might have one for SQL. And then it will pull in the right context at the right time. So we're not just bloating that context window and probably confusing the agent at the same time by giving it too much information.
Exactly. Like you should not include all of your coding standards for everything in your projects. And that's why these things are per project steering files, per repo.
Yes.
So it is definitely critical. I've seen actually internal teams when they use coding assistants internally. Like I saw a collection of these steering files, and they're like hundreds of megabytes of text files, right? You should not put all of them there. That's not how it's gonna work. So
absolutely,
I like this. And by the way, like people have built platforms online that includes like rules and I think cursor rules and whatever all other agent MD files out there. So there's a vast community of people building these, and I'm sure you can find the correct ones for your project.
Absolutely, yeah, yep. While you've been chatting there, I just threw in a couple extras. So for example, right, we had Python. I might have HTML in here, and I might set rules up like not literally just HTML, but there's probably some CSS that's in here. So when I'm working with these file types, I want you to think about this. And then in SQL, I've set up some rules about what SQL should look like, what my query formatting looks like. And notice here, I have this on SQL, but I also say, well, probably we should pull this in with Python because there's a lot of SQL embedded in my code. Probably not a best practice, but there is. And so you can be specific about when you want these files pulled in.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Now, tell me about this inclusion. I just see people freaking out about it. Is this something specific to a steering file, or in a sense, like, does this do any sort of mechanical triggers, or is it just like telling Kiro that?
It is just hints about what I want to use when, and essentially is looking at what file I'm currently editing to make some decisions about when to pull it in.
But that seems to be very good, I would say. Like it actually kind of steers it. Steers it to the right thing. So I like that. Okay.
Absolutely.
You should make a post about this.
Yes. I have a post coming up. I know that's maybe. Before we get to that, though, I think we should talk a little bit about. I'm being very explicit right now in adding these rules in. This is great for kind of greenfield when I'm just starting out and I want to codify my best practices before I start. We should talk a little bit about allowing Kiro to generate the steering files for a brownfield application, right? For something that already exists. So. Let's grab maybe, I'm going to go back into that Hangman project. this is now the complete one. This is a little bit further on that has all the tasks completed. I've built out my whole plan. Imagine I wanted to come back and make changes to this. I could go in and try to derive all those rules. Oh, sorry. I know you're going to tell me to zoom.
Yep.
I'll do that for you.
I was about to do it.
Yeah. So the other thing is, when I first came in here, Kiro was offering to generate steering files. And I'm going to just click this. Essentially, what this is going to do is Kiro's now just going to go look over my whole project. So when I'm working on a project that already exists, maybe I've got 10 or 20,000 lines of code in here on a mature enterprise project. That's a lot for Kiro to just ingest in real time. If I just started coding in a project like that, I'm throwing an awful lot of expectation at it. Go and look across all these files, what might be hundreds of files and tens of thousands of lines of code. What this does is Kiro will go and do that up front and then derive the steering files from that to help it. And this will make more sense in a minute. I'll let it build these out a bit before I bring these up. So you can also see here that Kiro is very opinionated about the structure of these. And so it always generates this product, structure, and tech files when you ask it to generate. Before, I was making up the names. And what you're going to find, again, this is a pretty simplistic application. Hangman's not exactly a complex enterprise app. But you can see here that it's gone and derived a lot of information about, hey, this is a game. This is what you're working on. We've got support for different languages. We've got a music system and sound system. So this is really just distilling and summarizing a couple hundred lines of code in this case, not quite thousands, but a couple hundred down to 30 lines that say, when you're working on this, I want you to very quickly understand contextually what this project is. What is this thing we're working on? And that's what the product steering file does. Then the structure one comes in and starts to define where are you going to find stuff in this project. So when you need to know more, you know where to find it. And so it gives me a good understanding of the structure. And then goes through and starts to talk about file naming conventions and architecture patterns that exist. How is this project overall structured and where can I find things? In many cases, you might have great documentation and all of this is well covered in your README, but often that's not the case. And so this can really help generate a lot of that for you when you don't have things up to date. And then finally, it goes through and outlines the tech stack and says, these are, right, we've got Python, I'm running Pygame 2.0, lays out all the details about the project. If you're going to run, right, if you worked with these tools, it writes code and then tests it. How do I activate the virtual environment? How do I run my unit test to make sure that everything's right? And really codifies all that knowledge. So I can be very specific about the things I want to tell it, but Kiro does a great job of refining this and sort of distilling down a complex project to make it really easy for Kiro to be effective later on. So it's not just blindly iterating across hundreds of files in a complex project.
Yeah, that's good. And again, you can modify these files. Like these files that are being generated, they are not like set in stone. It creates them for you, but then you can add your own little things and you can add certain instructions and whatnot. Kiro is usually very good in like generating what it needs, but again, you can add stuff here. And I like the fact because I've built a lot of projects in the past that have not been built with Kiro or any coding assistant, and then they may have their quirks and they may have their own the ways I build stuff and maybe not reflecting the practices that Kiro would be used to. And if you do not have this, while Kiro is able to kind of look at your code and define those things kind of like as it goes, it has to do it all the time. And giving it steering files like this is just a very efficient way of doing it. So again, chat, even if you're not using steering files like intensely, just generate steering files for a project you're working on, and don't worry about it. Just keep them like that, and it's going to help you, kind of curtail your token usage or whatever vibe usage. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, perfect. And of course, as I was showing here quickly, you can combine these, right? I can add in my coding standards just because Kiro's opinionated and built these 3 files. I can still go add my, in this case, SQL.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good point, right? a comment here from a LinkedIn user. We don't see your name, but when you modify steering spec files, make sure to refresh or ask Kiro to reload them, reread them. Yes, that's the thing. Because if you're like in a vibe session or a spec session, it will not reload them automatically. You have to tell Kiro, oh, by the way, read my steering files again, or read whatever, and it's going to go ahead and do it again, because in its context, it's going to have the old ones as well. What I like to use steering files for as well is like, I create a file called, I don't know, builds.md, and that's where I keep the history of what we've built and how we built it, right? Like if we've implemented this, implemented that, kind of like as we've went through like vibe coding. I'm not talking spec here. If we went through vibe coding, so the new session of Kiro has the history of what has been done and what kind of problems we ran into, because sometimes an LLM can make things up, and if we run into that problem and we note it down that thing doesn't actually work, it may not do it again.
That's perfect. Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. You've mentioned this this blog post a couple of times that we were talking about as we were getting ready, and so I'll get to this in a little bit. But one of the things that I want to come back to, and I've said this multiple times, is it's really important to bring the agent into the conversation. And so I'll talk about this in a little more detail, but I'm going to kind of jump to the end of this blog post. And essentially, one of the best practices that I've found is occasionally, despite all of my efforts to build steering files that really pointed in the right direction, we still get mistakes.
Yep.
And so often I will put a prompt like this in that says, hey, now that you've figured out and worked through this problem, do you want to go update the steering files and add some additional knowledge into it? And I just let Kiro go make changes and say, you've just fought through this issue for 3 or 4 minutes, figured out how to fix it and get those tests working again. Why don't you go codify this knowledge for yourself in a form that's optimized for you, so that next time we do this, you're ready.
Yeah. That's fair. I like that. And I'm a big fan of I don't know if this is like the best practice of doing stuff with like coding assistants, but I'm a big fan of resetting my coding sessions. I feel like sometimes when it goes too long, it becomes stupid, and I just like, you know what, pump the brakes, stop it, let me do a new one. But with something like steering files and history and like some stuff, it kind of can recall what you've done. It's way better in restarting that session. So
yeah. Absolutely.
Denali is asking you, is there a link to that post? Not yet.
Not yet. You're seeing kind of the draft. I hid the comments because some of them were scathing. I'll have to fix some of those before this makes it out and sees the light of day. But essentially, I'll give you the 2-minute version of this post. I know we're kind of running short on time, but a common thing that I talk to customers about is they have some form of a domain-specific language, or in this case, it's really kind of a JSON, interpreted JSON. But a lot of customers have, custom workflow languages, or they have codified maybe different tax policies for different jurisdictions in a markdown with JSON or XML or something like that. And they need to teach the tool about this because the tool's never seen this kind of custom language of theirs before. And so for this blog post, essentially, I've created a fake domain-specific language for managing math. Right. So here's addition, where I kind of add 2 numbers. That's really trivial, right? But we can start to build on this and do things like combine complex math calculations. These are all reasonably trivial still. And I'll show you some real world examples. But the idea here is I want to teach Kiro how this works. And so I've got a whole bunch of documentation here in my project, in this case, just writing GitHub. And what I want to do with this is go and start to build some knowledge in Kiro about this custom thing. And so common questions I get about this are, well, should I do this with steering files? Should I do this with an MCP server? And really the answer is you should use all of these things in concert. We're talking today about steering files, but don't limit yourself to just one. It's really tempting to just grab the docs and throw them right into the steering directory. And that would probably work, but 1, they're huge and overwhelming. And 2, they're going to be out of date shortly. And by creating copies in your project folder, well, that's probably going to trip you up. Now, in this case, the documentation is just sitting in GitHub. The MCP server can get me there, but I need to connect the dots, right? If I just have a GitHub MCP server, Kiro's not going to connect the dots that when I want to write math, I need to go look in there and understand how to write math in this domain-specific language. So essentially what I've done here is just told it, hey, you're working on this math JSON language. You should use the MCP server, and here's all the most important documents so you can go find them, so you don't have to go just indexing around. And then some best practices, like, hey, you should always validate this with a linter. You've got a linter installed, make sure you use it. And so again, I've really distilled down hundreds of lines of documentation with all these complex examples into something really short with pointers out to where the documentation lives. And then I can come in and ask it, again, hopefully this demo goes well, but I'm going to say, create me a function for that calculates mortgage overpayment and looks at the impact of overpaying. And so you can see we've pulled in that steering document, and that gave it the pointers to say, okay, now you need to go use the MCP tool to start querying the documentation that's up to date because this is the source of truth.
Yes.
And then you can start working on actually writing these math calculations. And if this goes as planned, it'll generate a couple of these math files and then start to use the tools that I told it about, the linter and the validation, to make sure that they all work right. So this very short 37-line steering file is giving it a ton of information about where to find more documentation, how to use the tools that are installed to validate.
Yep.
And then you just use the feedback to say, hey, if it didn't lint properly, if you've got a problem, is there some hints that you want to put back into that steering doc so that it's always up to date? And that's the solution that I've kind of landed upon over time.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, definitely that's the case. And also think about people when you chat to, like, when you talk to Kiro, either Spec or Vibing, think about things you say on repeat. Because I had this thing where I would always tell my LLM, always use whatever, this type of crate, or never write a SQL file in the root directory, but use a whatever. So some of the things I will keep telling it, I always end up putting that into a steering doc, because that I just have to repeat it. It knows automatically how to do that. And this definitely this definitely works in even MCP server instructions. Well, the MCP servers protocol has like the whole description of an MCP server that an LLM can kind of figure out what it does. I like to give it like very specific MCP server instructions in my steering files. Like whenever you don't know a question, use the fetch MCP to go and search online or something, right? Like I give it a lot more instructions on how to do certain things.
Yes. Yep.
And we
absolutely. Yeah. So if you've been watching this a little bit, right, you saw that it actually went through and built them, read the documentation, learned how to write this fictitious language that I invented, or I mean, I let Kiro invent this too, of course. It went through, linted everything, and then ran and validated that they're working. And you can see that it still isn't wildly complex, but it was really able to understand all of this and put together some reasonably complex math calculations here to model different mortgage payment scenarios. So you could imagine how you could use these combination of tools to connect the dots to be able to teach Kiro how to do things that it didn't know how to do.
Yeah. Agreed. Amazing. Well, okay. I think we're closely wrapping up the stream. We're at the end of the stream. So folks out there, keep an eye out on the blog post coming in from Brian. It's going to be posted all over the place. Check out the Discord. I think I can drop in a link to the Discord. Where is it? I want to drop a link to the Discord invite. So see how I can invite you all. So let's see. Invite people. Not the stage. How do I do that? I need to figure out how to invite people to Discord. It used to be very much simple. I'll figure it out. I'm so sorry. Yes, but check out the Discord. Go to Kiro.dev. You'll find all the links there, actually. So go to Kiro.dev. You'll find on the links so you can kind of connect with us and follow us and look at all the content. But It has been really fun, Brian. Thank you so much for being part of this whole show. And
Oh, thanks for having me. This has been great.
We'll be seeing a lot more of Brian. Hey, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. That's the link. Hawklimbs, thank you so much. We'll be seeing you all some other time at more live streaming here on Kiro.dev on whatever platform. So Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch as well. Okay, do I have an outro stream? I don't know, Brian. Is there anything we haven't said before we wrap up? By the way, we have a couple more minutes.
No, I think we hit the highlights on steering files here.
Yeah.
Right. It's all about trying to codify best practices about what you want to accomplish, and really, if you do this well, the outcomes you're going to get out of the tool are dramatically improved. And right. And as you said at the beginning, that's going to lead to a lot less rework and really help you optimize. So it's really important.
100%. Okay. Awesome. Perfect. Okay. Ending the live stream, my friends. See you all next time. Bye-bye.